6. Sometimes it skips 5 like it just did on my screen. Alrighty, you guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Unlock Your Freedom podcast with Kevin Keppel. Today we have Ramona Shaw along for the ride with us. What's going on, Ramona? How are you?
Yay! I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing excellent, thanks. It's great to connect with you on here. Thanks for fighting through all the exciting things that went on with you recently at the blood transfusion that you didn't know you were doing, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on, for making this happen, making this work.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. You're a lot of fun, so I'm excited to get to unpack all your genius. So to kick us off, tell us a little bit about you and who you serve and who you be and all that good stuff.
Okay. Well, people always ask me where my accent's from, so I'm going to start there. I was born and raised in Switzerland, so my accent is Swiss. I was transferred out to the US, San Francisco specifically, about, I would say, like 12 years ago, on an expat assignment, and just never left. Love it here. That was also the time where I first transitioned into leadership role for the first time. And through that process, I was in finance, in private equity specifically. It's a very male-dominated, fast-paced environment. I was leading a team of people that were way older than me. It's a new culture. There's a bit of a language barrier, I think, at play too. And the first couple of years were definitely hard for me. And I thought, wow, I really enjoyed being, doing my own stuff and delivering results. And now the people aspect is way harder than I thought. And that really got me interested in leadership development and that whole field, and what was initially sort of like going down a rabbit hole and seeing how much there's in parallel between my own desire to grow personally and the personal development journey that I was on, and seeing the parallels. That then ultimately led to me creating my own company, spinning out of the corporate world. And now I help new managers transition into their first leadership role, but I also work with teams and more senior leaders in leveling up and being a leader people love to work for, as I like to say.
Yeah, could you go back for just a second and go a little deeper on the different types of people that you work with? I want to make sure that we all capture that.
Yeah, so I work with the people who are initially transitioning into their first leadership role. So this is really what I think is one of the biggest steps in, or shifts or changes in someone's career, is moving from an individual contributor role into their first leadership role. And this could actually be, in a big corporation where they're taking on a team. It could be in a startup that just massively grows and they are really quick of onboarding and hiring. And in no time, and this happens to numerous of my clients, in no time they go from maybe having one person on their team to then having to manage 10, and then really quickly starting to manage managers as well. It could also mean that founders, it could also be related to founders or business owners who have a great idea, build an initial team, but it's very collaborative, or more on almost like a peer-to-peer basis, up to like 4 or 5. And then all of a sudden they start to realize, like, whoa, hold on a second. Now this becomes like a people leader role that I'm in, or find myself in as well, in addition to actually running the business. And that transition is what I support with my clients with, because not only is it a new skill set, but it comes with a lot of changes in terms of mindset and how we see ourselves creating value in an organization, what we consider to be productive and effective, and things that make us usually really strong as ICs or individual contributors are often the things that could actually make us less effective or respected as leaders.
So when people are going to this new role, and I've seen this so many times, actually, I've been on the other side of it and been the one getting, promoted to the new role, and like suddenly you're a leader because you're a good performer, but that doesn't mean you're a good leader by any means. And, the first leadership role I had, I'm like, how do I be a leader? And there's, tons and tons of information out there. And, the leader that I had at the time, we're looking for a model, right? And he was modeling leadership to me, and he was very aggressive and abusive and verbally and mentally, and just not a great example of leadership. And so, where do we go to learn how to be a leader? And, what's the big common mistake you see from the first time leaders that you've worked with, and just in your experience?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So I read a book about these four main shifts called Confident and Competent New Manager. And I wrote it specifically because there are the tactical things like the competencies and the leadership, all the leadership styles. And there's a lot of information out there about how to lead. But the gap that I try to really fill, and what I think is really important in terms of answering your question here, is what are the mindset shifts, right? Going from thinking, for example, that you have to create results, you have to produce the results, and that is seeing that you can deliver something, create value, is what gives you that sense of reward and also recognition that you then get as a result of that. Then getting into a leadership role where the results come from the people on your team. So if you spend most of your time in a leadership role in meetings, unblocking other people and helping them bring their strength to the workplace and really being able to leverage their strength, that is when you're doing your job. And oftentimes I hear people say, well, I'm helping everyone else. And by the way, these were exactly my words in my head as well at that time. It's like, I'm helping everyone else. And then it's 5:00. People leave and I'm still sitting there with a whole day full of work that I should be doing in order to move my project and my work forward. And it can feel really draining at that time and dissatisfying, and can be hard for people to actually elevate and not recognize that a big part of what they should be doing and what productivity now looks like is actually to help everyone else on their team. Another part is sort of the idea, or it's kind of built in, I think, from a really young age, that we think we need to have the answers to questions that we get asked. And then that gets reinforced when we're strong performers or expert leaders, including business owners who create their businesses. They're the go-to person for all kind of questions, right? The clients come to them for questions. The first employees or team members come to them with questions to get answers. And so it's all about giving answers, doing things, solving problems. And that helps a lot. It's great. But then in a leadership role, that's the thing that creates, not only can create frustration for team members, they feel like they no longer have any sense of autonomy, or that they're being trusted because their boss will always dictate to them and tell them exactly what to do. But it also creates the dynamic where the employee may ask a question, and instead of the leader taking on a bit of a coach-like approach and leading with questions and challenging the other person to think through the problem on their own so that they can learn, they think, oh, it's just easier, or just the default pattern is to answer those questions. That's what we've learned from school, to answer those questions. But then everything depends on that leader. There's no growth that can happen. And the leader quickly turns into a bottleneck. It can feel like everything is dependent on the leader being present. And if the leader ever goes away or is on vacation or tries to move up, no one is filling that gap, because no one was trained to think like the leader is trained, or the leader naturally does. So this idea of giving answers and solving problems for everyone else is one of the mindsets to drop, and instead to embrace that I'm not here to answer all the questions and solve everyone's problems. I'm here to help other people think through and show them how I think about problems by asking specific questions that will help them get there.
Yeah, wow, that's really powerful. There was like so much genius in what you just said. And I think if you're listening to this and you just understand what Ramona just shared and deploy, there's 3 things I heard in there that really stood out. It would totally change your leadership. It would totally change your impact, your effectiveness, your organization, your whatever. And the 3 things that I really heard was, humility, saying, I don't know, right? Which took me 3 decades to learn how to do that. I mean it, literally. Like I had to know everything. And if I didn't know, I thought I should know. And I acted like I knew. And it was so hard to know it all, because, you don't know anything really. It's what you think you know that just ain't so, that's so dangerous. And
yeah,
also
exactly.
just owning your boundaries. I heard you say that too. It's like you can't say yes to everything and be effective. It just doesn't work. And that also, telling people what to do. That's not leadership. That's management. And leaders. I think the best thing we can do as leaders is empower and inspire people to creatively solve their own problems. And that's what
Mm-hmm.
Ramona just explained in a really sophisticated way with questions. And I would be curious, in your opinion, what is like the biggest barrier to people, really stepping over to the leadership side and empowering people as opposed to just being a manager and telling people what to do?
Yeah. Well, and I think this the what you just said about the humility and owning that you don't know. I think that's really hard for new managers. Just to weave that in here really quickly, I think that's really difficult for new managers because they often think they need to prove themselves, and they need to show that they know and that they're in the right spot. Like it was the company's right decision to promote them, and so asking for help or telling someone I actually don't know how to go about this or how to do this can feel so counter. Even people who are new in a management role or are entering a new manager role and the company's hiring them, they know that that's their first leadership role. And when I say in your negotiation for the contract, the employment contract, talk about leadership coaching and training and ask them what kind of support is provided internally and what tuition reimbursement they provide. And people are still hesitant to ask because they think, well, if I tell them that I need training or coaching, they may think, wait a second, maybe she isn't ready. I'm like, no, that's exactly the level of awareness that we need to show and say, like, no, this is the next level. Like, matter of fact, this is the next level. And in order to set myself up for success, I have the humility to say there are things that I'm going to do for the first time and I want to do them well and I want to do it right for my team. So what are the resources, right? And so that can be a hard transition to make. And then what you said about sort of the leading with question, this is also one that I see often people get stuck in when they move further, when they're further along, they're in the that mid-level management position, and they're looking to elevate. And that's another, group of people that I work with. One of the two ways or two reasons that they're hesitant or that they haven't yet really gotten to the place where they would embrace this idea of leading more with questions than with answers is one, it can feel like there's a lack of control. It can feel quickly like, well, but if I don't tell them how to do it, then they're going to just do something. And that's not going to be the thing that I want them to do. So it feels like I'm letting go of control. And for many people, especially successful people, that can trigger some anxiousness, right? Make them
that word right there, control. Oh my gosh. But that's, that's where all suffering comes from, right? It's trying to control things that are outside of us, at least according to Buddha. And I think he's pretty right on that one. Like, raise your hand if you like to be controlled. Like, no one raises their hand, but that's force, right? Try to force me to do something. Like, even if it's something I actually want to do and you're forcing me, I probably won't do it because I feel like I'm being pushed and I don't like to be pushed. And the natural, there's always counterforce to force, and you push, there's a pushback. And it's like, man, like, if again, empower and inspire, stimulate to action, give them the tools to know what to do with that action, not tell people what to do and force them to bend to your will, because that also like goes with the faulty assumption that I have all the right answers, which I definitely do not. And, Steve Jobs was brilliant at Apple. And as everybody knows, and he said, we don't hire smart people so we can tell them what to do. We hire them so they can tell us what to do. Like, yeah, I don't hire people to code my website and then tell them how to code, right? Like, hey, let me help you with my 0 hours of experience here on this thing that you're an expert at. That would be ridiculous. Ask them.
Totally. Or like something happens and it over the course of 2 days, like a project is, is getting messy and people are messaging and data points are not making sense, or there were mistakes in how something was executed. And then the employee goes to the manager and says like, hey, I want to talk to you about what happened on this project. And for 5 minutes, they're explaining the situation. So the manager then starts to give advice based on 5 minutes of information that were basically like the headline of what just happened over the course of 2 days. And then them giving advice and suggestion and being really directive without leaving room to explore more and to challenge more or to at least inquire first. But the immediate response is to give advice, comes with the assumption that the 5 minutes are actually adequately communicating reality of what happened over the course of 2 days, and it's impossible, right? So we always work, the higher up we go, the less information you have of what actually happened, and the more important it is to recognize, like, hey, after 5 minutes of summarizing what just happened, I for sure don't know yet the full story. So, here are some of the red flags that I heard. So tell me more about those. Right.
Yeah. That right there, like, when people are talking to you, especially if you're the leader, often, they're really being intentional, hopefully, about, saying what they're trying to say in a, way that's, powerful, but, also the most clear, so that they're not misunderstood. And so, they pause a little more than they normally would in a conversation, probably sometimes. And, usually when people pause, they're just trying to think about what they want to say next, and, the most, clear way. And if you step on people's words, like, then you really don't know what they were going to say, and they don't feel heard, and you just totally disconnect. And like, if you're not connecting with people, you're not satisfying that influence equation, right? You got to have trust and connection, then they'll co-create the vision with you. So when it goes, let's go back to delegation for a second, or trying to do it all, or, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, how do you know, like, what's appropriate to delegate as opposed to what you should do? Because you don't really, like, hey, do everything, and I'm going to sit in here and check out Instagram for, a few hours, and then you tell me when you're done, and then I'll go give you some more stuff, right?
You probably just tapped into people's biggest fears, which is people actually say this to me. They're like, I know this is kind of a dumb thought, but it is a thought running through my head. I'm like, yeah, there's no dumb thoughts, but it's true. People worry that if they delegate too much, or they delegate even not just too much, they delegate stuff that then their employees will think, especially in remote worlds, where it's like, what does my boss actually do? Because I feel like I'm doing all the work. And managers are often really worried about being perceived that way. Because all the things I do, like the meetings, is so intangible. I actually don't know what I'm doing either, right? So, yeah, that's you probably just sparked that fear in people.
Yeah. Well, so how do you know what's appropriate to delegate?
Yeah. So I think, so we talked about control. And then the second thing that I wanted to talk about, and that's getting in the way, is that people worry about hurting or pushing someone else out of their comfort zone. So it's the same with feedback, where we think one of the reasons, or one of the things that get in the way of candid feedback is, oh, I don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. The truth of the matter is, if I hurt or feel like what I'm saying is going to hurt someone's feeling or make someone feel disappointed, then I see them be disappointed. And when I see them be disappointed, and I'm not going to feel good, and I don't want to do something that makes them not feel good and me not feel good, right? So when it comes to delegating, I think the hurdle could either be control, giving up control, or another common one is not wanting to burden someone else, stretch someone else, make someone else feel too challenged, or even sometimes we may have to delegate a very mundane task, and then we worry that the other person will be bored by the task that we're delegating. And so we'd rather just take it on ourselves. And it's a very flawed thinking. It's a bit of one of those thought errors that we have running through our heads, because it's on one hand, we haven't even opened up the conversation with the employee to say, this is something that I'm considering delegating. If you were to take that on, how interested would you be? When could you do it? Like, even have a conversation about, and letting them share back what they would actually feel about, how they would feel about it, without making all the assumptions ahead of time. That's one. But then also to recognize that anything that you do and hold on to is coming at an opportunity cost. There is never a saying yes to this and not also saying no to something else. And that other thing either be spending time, quality time with your loved ones. It could be rejuvenational activities, but it could also mean it's compromising the work that may seem less urgent, but equally important, that you should actually be doing. That trade-off we often overlook. And when it comes to what to delegate, having a really, really clear idea of what costs anything that I'm taking on, at what cost is this coming? And people who don't manage their time and don't block out time for the gym or for going out on walks or spending time with family members or friends, and that isn't in the calendar, where they would have to delete that activity out of their calendar in order to say yes to something else, they often don't recognize the trade-off in the moment. And the emotional reactive state of like, oh my gosh, the fear of the repercussion or the fear of making someone else feel annoyed by me delegating, they will take over, and we will rationalize in the moment to do it ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's so important that you are very intentional about being, productive as opposed to busy. And, it's like, well, I got this space, like, doing whatever form of self care you like, getting a massage, going to the gym, taking a walk, whatever. You're like, well, that feels lazy. And the reason a lot of people get promoted to leaderships because they're crushing it in some way, right? They're working, hard or whatever. They think that more of the same is going to get them to the next level. And it's like, what got you here is not going to get you there. And, like I used to wear busy like a badge of honor. Like, I'm the busiest person that's ever been busy, right? And like it wasn't that productive though. And it's
What a
like
quotable. Oh my gosh.
yeah, I know. It was, yeah. Just learn from my failures, please. But one of the things I also see a lot of people struggling with, and myself included in the past, was the worst game in the world to play, the comparison game. Looking at other people, comparing my work, myself to them, and usually feeling inferior, but maybe even worse, feeling superior. And like both of those are huge disconnects. And so, what do you, what kind of things do you do with people that struggle with comparison?
Yeah. There's something about there. I think the problem comes up when people start talking about the other people too often and not doing enough introspection. Because, like we've talked about the control before, we can control things and that are beyond us. Especially, we cannot control other people. They're all adults that we work with. They all have the freedom to choose to do and to show up in whatever they want. And when we have this when we notice that we're starting to compare ourselves, it usually comes from a sort of sense of not being good enough. When we really dig down, and right, as coaches, we love to go to like the bottom and the core of it, of what is actually happening. And when we boil it down, it often goes to like, I don't feel like I'm good at this enough, and I'm good enough at this. I feel like other people could take over my job. I feel like I could lose my job. I feel like that I'm disappointing someone in this. And that's where we want to start. It's not about stopping the behavior, although there are some, simple things as don't go on Instagram, right? Or how can you reframe what you just saw? But at the core of it is to recognize what I see when I compare myself to others and I have this inferior or superior feeling. Then it's about what's going on inside of me, and that's really treating the source, the root cause of, I'm going to call this like the wound, right? Versus just putting a Band-Aid on top.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. And like we get what we're looking for, and when you're intentional about looking for why you're different and less than or better than somebody else, you're going to find proof to prove yourself right. It's confirmation bias. But it's so much more powerful. I've found that when we go to look at other people, it's not for replication. That's what comparison is trying to do. Like, I'm trying to copy your version of success. Or lack thereof, maybe. But it's really about inspiration. Like, cool, man. Like, how can I use what they're doing, to maximize an idea I have? Like that's creativity, right? It doesn't repeat itself, but it will rhyme, right?
Yeah. And I think the even the idea of jealousy, when we're jealous of someone's job or position or salary or who knows what, and then we look at that, and instead of saying like, oh man, I'm jealous and I want that too, it's the interesting. I'm jealous because it seems like there's something that I desire and don't yet have. So jealousy to me is always a signal like there's something there that I'm actually craving. And maybe I should do some writing about it and really dive deeper into, do I really want this? Or do I not want it? And it just was sort of one of those shiny objects, or like short. Yeah, I do want the outcome. I don't want to put the work in. Right? It's a lot of outcomes I'd like, but maybe I don't want to put the work in. But if I actually do it, actually want it, there are people that have run businesses that I'm like, I want that kind of business. And yes, I'm willing to put the work on it. And yes, I'm willing to go through the valley of despair and go through the challenges. But I notice jealousy when I look at their business. And then it's not about, there's no inferior feeling or superior feeling or any of that I associate to that jealousy. It's more about, interesting. That is in alignment with my goals. How can I pursue and learn from this person, or just what I'm observing, and then start getting to work myself in order to get there?
Yeah, that's really powerful because jealousy is just an emotion, and emotions are data. But if you react to the emotion, more emotion and more thoughts, and you get this, stuck in a loop of just being jealous instead of actually growing from that place. So that was super powerful.
Also, just this, sorry, I'm gonna go back to like who knows what, some guy on Instagram did this like wrap around emotions, which has been sitting with me. It's like not every emotion is like replicating or demonstrating reality or giving you indication of what's real. It's just an emotion. And I say this a lot with the thoughts. Like thoughts are like clouds going, crossing the sky, and they just go by. Not all the clouds are you're going to hang on to. You don't have to look at them all. Some of them, just let them pass. They're not the truth. And I think we also don't need to respond to every emotion. Some emotions just, had a thought, create an emotion, moving on, letting that emotion go through my body like a wave, and that's it.
Yeah, that's letting go right there. Brilliant explanation of letting go. It's like you don't have to believe everything you think. Like that right there will that'll change your life if you understand that.
Totally.
Like, you don't have to believe everything you think. And maybe to take it a step further, like you don't have to have an opinion about everything you think. And you don't need to have an opinion about everything other people think. It's like, man, like we live in this, world. Our reality is created by our thinking, but there's reality beyond our thinking because, two different people in the same exact situation have two different completely experiences, right? It's not, the people around us or the situations we're in that make us happy or unhappy. It's the thinking in our head and the emotions we attach to it. Like really, really simple. That's why. If I go fishing with my brother, he has a great time and I have the least fun of my life. It's like he loves to fish and I'm bored talking about it, but it's the same exact event, right? Just different experiences.
Yeah, totally. Or even the other day I was at home and I was alone and I was like, oh, man, I feel lonely. And I was like, yeah. And so what? Like, I don't need to investigate it, right? If I were to go and then feel like I needed to I couldn't sit with the discomfort of feeling lonely, and I would have to immediately go out or invite people over, and I can't be lonely ever, I think that would be worthwhile investigating. But if I'm like, yeah, I'm just lonely, it's just, it's the earrings I'm wearing right now, that's it.
Yeah. And that's so true. Like lonely is a very normal thing. Like we all get that feeling, and it's not bad until we start telling ourselves it's bad. Like, oh, I'm lonely, and that's not okay. I need to do something about it. And then what happens? We start trying to control. We're trying to control people, situations, outcomes, ourselves. Right?
Exactly.
Just be with it. Let it go. Whatever. Like it'll pass. That's like one of the guarantees. Change will happen. Right?
Yep. And I think in the workplace, if we notice our ego just got poked, it can feel like, okay, that hurt, or I did not like what was just said. And I have two options. I can either use that and I can realize that maybe wait a moment until I'm less emotionally charged, but then say, you know what, that wasn't okay. I want to talk about it. And I want to tell someone how that landed with me or the impact it had, or what I think would be a better way to communicate something in the future, right? I can take that emotion as sort of a call to act on it and communicate. Or I can just also realize, you know what, that had nothing to do with the other person and everything to do with me. And I'm going to let that go. But I cannot, and this is one, I'm always like, hold on, like, don't get a defense mechanism down. Just hang out with me for a second. One of the things that I think we sometimes do is we don't communicate, but then we still feel the emotion and we keep that emotion running. Like we get frustrated and disappointed. Why aren't they doing what they said they're going to do? They keep saying, next week, I didn't get to it. And they just keep pushing down the deadline over and over and then not doing it. And inside of me, I'm starting to feel really frustrated, but I never tell them. I'm like, no, that you can't do that. You can either feel frustrated and then you're going to communicate, or you're going to let the emotion go. You're going to process it, own it, and let it go. But holding on to it and not communicating, it's not going to work. Never does.
No, because then like the problem becomes the problem long after the actual problem is probably gone. Now you're just like focused on this like perceived slight or whatever, and you're holding on to that, and like and that's not fair to anybody. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the people that you serve, because they're missing out on part of your genius if you're dissipating it and diluting it with anger.
Totally.
I read somewhere and I really liked it. It said, anger is punishment for someone else's actions. I was like, man, that's good. It's like I punish myself when I get angry because somebody else didn't, act right, quote unquote, whatever that means.
Exactly.
If everybody would just act right, I'd be happy,
Yeah.
Like, that's so ludicrous, because people are the world's greatest variable,
Yeah. And I think, just what we've talked about in the last 10 to 15 minutes, I think if people, and right, I'm also not saying that I'm by all means perfect with this, but I think if we are all making an effort towards owning our own emotions and our thoughts, communicating if we think, there's something worthwhile communicating, not just holding on to it. If we let go of the sense of control, and also communicate to other people what we intend to do instead of making and what we'd like to do or should be doing, and letting them have a response and make decisions of what is okay and what isn't okay, without us trying to make all kinds of assumptions about people ahead of time without communicating. So many problems in the leadership space and in management overall could be prevented or at least mitigated over time.
That's so good. Okay, I could talk to you all day about this, but this is a lot of brilliance. But I want to go into the fire around here and protect your time. I'm sure you got people to serve. So, so quick answers, quick questions. What's a piece of mindset advice you'd give to a new leader?
A piece of mindset advice. Oh my gosh, I would say, be curious. Just really embrace curiosity in every conversation.
Yeah. I mean, that's the first, step in motivation right there is curiosity. That's how all things have been created. Like that what if. What's something in your life, Ramona, that's non-negotiable?
A non-negotiable. Oh my gosh, one thing. Like, wait a second. Okay, I want to go to the gym. Well, I don't need to go to the gym. I just need to move. It's a non-negotiable, but I also need quiet time. I know that I'm more on that in scale of being more of an introvert. If I don't have quiet time, it's not really sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an extrovert, but I definitely have introvert tendencies. I think everybody needs stillness and quiet, because like if it's just busy, then that's just chaos, and creativity doesn't have a path to flow.
Yeah.
What's a favorite book to read, recommend, give away? Not the favorite, but a favorite.
A favorite, right? As I'm sitting here, like surrounded by books. So I love books, but I think one that got me thinking and that I loved reading, and maybe even the audiobook, it's called Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. That I would probably say is a really good read. It sort of looks at leadership it's a fable. So it looks at leadership in a storytelling kind of way that really resonated with me, and goes way beyond just behaviors. Goes really deep.
Ooh, cool. I love books too. I'm going to check that out for sure. All right. What's one message, if you could get it out to everybody in the world, what would that be?
I would say the big message is ask for help. I think we often try to do things by ourselves. And I'm a working mom. Takes a village. A lot of people try to sort of say like, yeah, you can do it all. I'm like, yeah, you can do it all, but you can't do it alone. Like we got to ask for help. I recently hired a coach who's helping me on like my with my health in certain areas. And even that experience again was like, yeah, I can do my own thing over and over, but the asking for help and saying like, I can do better, I can learn something from other people, I can get the support, and that is the way that I can accelerate my performance or my results. Be this on the mental health side, on the physical health, on the emotional health, when it comes to leadership and the responsibility that leaders have, and asking for help to get the support. We see this in the military, we see this in sports, where there is a lot more help that is just built into the system, but somehow in the corporate world or the business world that I feel like we're not quite there yet. It's still perceived, at least on the outside, as if people should be doing it alone.
Yeah, that's so hard because nobody's great at everything, and you spend a lot of time, spinning your wheels when you're attempting to be good at everything. It's like I'm a terrible assistant to myself, and I need help. I need help there. So
Yeah, totally.
thankfully, there's people that do that. All right, last question for the great Ramona Shaw. Where can people go to learn more about you and interact with you?
Yeah, my website is ramonashaw.com. The podcast that I run is called the Manager Track Podcast. And I'm also on LinkedIn, Ramona Shaw. I think you should probably find me that way.
Yeah, Ramona's awesome, you guys. I would definitely check her out and connect with her. If I was you guys, she's the real deal, big brain, big heart, and likes to share both. And she's got a great podcast. Thanks. She's got a really phenomenal guest on her podcast. Talk about myself there. So
yeah.
Just a joke. But
we should link to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's got a great podcast. You guys, it's awesome. She's just a phenomenal host and a really, really cool human being. So grateful for you and our time together. Thanks for being
here.
here.
Same to you.
Right,
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man, that's our pleasure. Well, you guys, if you made it this far to the podcast, thanks so much for sticking through it, listening with us. Share it with a friend. Maybe somebody could benefit from Ramona's genius as well. So we'll see you guys next time on the Unlock Your Freedom podcast.